I've spent the better part of about 8 years now in the so-called black pill community, if you can even call it a community. And I found that the longer that I interact with these people and the longer that, I'm in these black pill servers and watching black pill content, the more kind of disillusioned I become from people that consider themselves black pilled. There's just so many people in this sphere that have views that I consider to be diametrically opposed to what it really means to be a black pillar. But in order to even make that judgment in the first place, it's necessary to kind of lay out what I believe the black pill to be. A lot of normies think that the black pill is just, genetic determinism and like lookism. I think it has to do with like the dating market. And they just kind of myopically relegate it to just being about lookism. In my opinion, the black pill is simply pessimistic realism. It's pessimistic realism applied to really anything. You can apply it to the very nature of existence itself. The belief that existence is fundamentally pain, suffering, frustration, dissatisfaction, that is inherent to the black pill. In a lot of ways, I consider Schopenhauer to be kind of like the proto black pillar. If you want to learn more about the black pill, yeah, just read Schopenhauer. I consider him to be kind of the granddaddy of all black pillars. But that being said, I've kind of compiled a list of 5 ideas, 5 beliefs that I see people who call themselves black pilled espouse that I believe just should be, we need to vet these people out of the community entirely. If you have any of these 5 beliefs, I don't consider you black pilled. So at number 1, I have pronatalists. If you are pronatalist, you are not black pilled. Pronatalism in the black pill purview makes no sense whatsoever. Existence, like I said, is pain, suffering, and frustration. There is no logical reasoning to be having children. This life is just non-existence is completely preferable to this. It's better not to have been born. Now, that being said, I do have my problems with certain antinatalist thinkers, such as David Benatar, with his whole argument from asymmetry thing. He's kind of like, he wrote like the antinatalist Bible, Better Never to Have Been, in which he posits that antinatalism is axiomatic in that pain is inherently bad and pleasure is inherently good, and if you exist, well, then there's the presence of harm, which is inherently bad. There's also the presence of benefit, which is good. However, if you never exist, then there's an absence of harm, and there's also, which is good, but there's also an absence of benefit, which is neither good nor bad, because you can't deprive somebody that doesn't exist of pleasure and have it be bad. And therefore, never existing is preferable to existence. I probably didn't explain that in the best way I could have, but that's his argument. That's the kind of Benatarian argument from asymmetry. And where I disagree with it is the idea that these are in any way axiomatic positions. You can't really say that pain is inherently negative. I mean, that is a moralization at the end of the day, and I don't believe that morals can ever really be objective. So I disagree with Benatar in that regard. I think that I could pretty easily argue that the presence of pain is actually a good thing from a Darwinistic perspective. The presence of pain, increases your biological fitness. It increases your ability to avoid things that would harm you, and therefore pain is good. You could also argue that people who don't have the ability to feel pain end up suffering more. A lot of people with the genetic deformity of not being able to feel pain will do things like, scratch their eyes out or harm themselves in some way and end up suffering more in that way. You could also make that argument. Either way, you get my point. I think that at the end of the day, this whole argument from asymmetry is really a moralization. I don't find it to be axiomatic. However, I don't believe that having children is a logical position either. I don't think you can logically justify it. I think most people have children for completely, actually, no, all people have children for purely selfish reasons. They have children for entertainment, for this kind of faux sense of immortality through continuing their own bloodline, through this desire to continue their legacy. And it's just completely illogical. It makes no sense. I believe having children is an inherently selfish position, and it in no way coincides with the black pill. It's an incompatible belief, and I'm sick of hearing so-called black pillars argue for pronatalism. I think it's indefensible. Number two, I have religious copers. I can't tell you how sick I am of hearing that, just believe in God, bro, and anything is possible. If you just believe in God, well then everything will be fine and you'll find fulfillment in life despite how horrible everything is. It's just a tired line, man. I'm so sick of hearing it. I also believe that religious coping is harmful in the way that it tends to teach complacency. It sort of teaches that, it doesn't really matter that things are awful here. It doesn't really matter that you're nothing more than a wage cuck and your life is horrible and you're working towards nothing. Because, once you die, if you behave and if you're just a good little goy, well, then you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. You'll be praised by Jesus whenever you die. And it's just like, it just teaches complacency. Teaches you to disregard this life in favor of an afterlife. And while I believe that like Western religions teach some good traits, they teach them on this kind of praise or scold, like heaven and hell dichotomy that is inherently antagonistic. Like Christianity, for example, teaches you to abstain from worldly pleasures and engage in asceticism, not for the merits of asceticism alone, but because if you do, you'll be rewarded, and if you don't, you'll be tortured in hell. I just believe that, these judgment based exoteric religions were just kind of an ancient way of controlling the masses and dictating behavior. And while I do understand their utility, I just think that if you still follow these belief systems in the modern day, I view you as kind of inherently sheep brained, and I just want no part in it. At number three, I have just denial of genetic determinism. There's actually a lot of denial of genetic determinism in the BP sphere. Um, it just seems to me that this is diametrically opposed to the BP, and everything that it stands for. Your life is genetics. Your life is your genetics playing out in front of you. Most things were predetermined. I don't really believe in free will in the classical sense. Or as Schopenhauer would put it, man can do what he wills, but man cannot will what he wills. Or in other words, it's not really up to you what you do and don't find compelling. Such as whenever you are watching a debate, you don't really have a choice in the matter which side you find more convincing. It's kind of this switch that flips in your head that, you find one side more compelling than the other. You can't force yourself to disagree with whatever position you inherently find more compelling. I usually see denial of genetic determinism in this sphere manifest itself in denial of race being biological, weirdly enough. There are a lot of people in this sphere that consider themselves black pillars that want to say that race is not genetic, that it has no basis in biology, which I find to be just frankly ridiculous. There are pretty accurate ways to determine race based on DNA using things like principal component analysis. And there are, differences in IQ between the races that I don't believe can be explained through socioeconomics. I believe IQ to be a largely heritable trait. And this is a controversial thing to say. People don't like to admit it. But I just find it kind of laughable that everybody is willing to accept these concepts that, your genetics are determining your behavior and your neurological makeup whenever it comes to like dogs, for example. Everybody's willing to readily accept that dog breeds are different behaviorally because of their genetics, but they're for some reason completely unwilling and just up in arms whenever you apply the same concept to human races. I'm not sure why they would be any different. Number four, I've got traditionalism, just traditional gender roles. I hate this specific type of inkwell that wants to revert back to 1950s traditionalist gender roles. I would never want to live like that. I would never want to be a provider man. I view it as inherently gynocentric. I don't know why you would want to subject yourself to being a man slave like that, working just to support some useless housewife woman that does nothing but sit around and clean all day. I also view the nuclear family as a mostly harmful construct. I think that it's kind of anthropologically a disaster. I believe children should be raised communally. Um, and I just don't believe that the nuclear family is how people are designed to exist. I don't think it's how we're supposed to exist. It's kind of historically novel, and it places economic pressure on people, and it leads to children being raised in abject poverty where they otherwise wouldn't be. And I don't like traditionalism. I view it as anti-male, and I don't understand incels that want to return to like 1950s relationship dynamics. Being some wife guy that works all day so that, you know, my wife can just sit at home and leech off of my income is not something that is all that appealing to me. Would never want to be a wife guy. At number 5 on my list, I just have MGTOWs. I wish these guys would just leave us alone. Every single MGTOW that I run into is incredibly outdated, out of touch. They have like these very, well, I guess I should clarify. I'm not really against the idea behind MGTOW. I have no problem with men going their own way in concept. However, what MGTOWs usually are in practice is they are incels in denial that have come up with this cope that like, oh, they don't even want women in the first place. They're MSTOWs. They're men sent their own way that pretend to have all of these androcentric, anti-gynocuck beliefs. And it's a coping mechanism. MGTOW men are coping incels in denial, and they drop all of their convictions the second that women show interest in them. They don't actually hold these convictions that they claim to have. On top of that, I find MGTOWs usually espouse these kind of like Andrew Tate-esque red pill opinions of like status maxing and getting your money up and things of that nature. I mean, every single one of them I've came across, it's some that tries to talk to black pillars. It's like they're preaching out of like a book that we've all read and disavowed 10 years ago. Almost every MGTOW I've ever talked to is like stuck in 2016 or something. They're usually all like older guys in like their 40s and 50s or whatever. But it's like they just don't understand the black pill. They have usually red pill outdated beliefs that your average black pillar probably believed like a decade ago. And I'm just done hearing from these guys. I think they're copers. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Those are my 5 ideas that I wish would stay out of the BP sphere that I'm tired of seeing. Was a kind of a rambly video that I stumbled through a bit, but we got through it, and I'm gonna be posting some more pretty soon. Might even be posting some Scribcell music before too long. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.